Okay, so now we are going to talk about visual consciousness and visual areas beyond V1. So far, I have been mainly explained about visual system through eyes here, and then that through the optic nerves goes to LGN here, and then this bundle of the axons is called optic radiation, and then that reaches to the back of the head here. That's a V1 here. And then the upper part of the V1, which corresponds to the lower visual field, connects to V2 areas that surrounds V1, and then V3. And then that's surrounded by something like V3 and V7. From here, it becomes more complicated and so on. And on the bottom part that goes below this surface, that goes to B2 and B3 as well for the ventral areas, and then B4 and B8. And then also the important architecture is this MT or B5 that we are going to talk about today. And then, yeah, so that's the overview of the visual areas beyond V1. So in terms of understanding the visual cortex, it is important to understand what the cortical flattening is and how the retinotopy looks like for V1 to V4. So to explain this figure, I think it's first better to look at the movie, such as this one. Okay, so this movie basically explains how the modern neuroscience actually analyze this brain data. So this is an image taken from MRI, and then initially it removes all these non-cortical surface areas and computationally, and then it tries to inflate as if it is sort of the balloon, and then so you can do this by computational kind of analysis using a technique called topology, and then this wrinkle, it gets completely inflated like this, and then at this point you can cut the brain in a way that that can unfold onto the two-dimensional surface, and that's how we see these types of the retinotopy image to be seen. Okay, so here's after the cortical flattening of the presentation of the right hemifield, right cortex for both macaque and human brain. So here's the key for the visual field. This is a left visual field, okay? And as I have already mentioned, the left visual field goes to the right hemisphere. And then the upper part, so the key to this location is the fovea. Fovea gets projected onto this circle, okay, here. And also other areas also have the fovea representation for both monkey and for human. And then the upper part of the left visual field goes into the lower part of the visual cortex. So here, this is actually, in a sense, a bit difficult to imagine, but the right cortex is now cut around here and then opened it up for B1 and B1. So this lower part gets here and the upper part of the B1 gets here. And that looks like, so the most upper part comes in this area, and the most lower part goes into the dorsal upper part of the brain, okay? And then same goes for the macaque. And then instead of going to the right visual field, it flips to next visual field in B2 in both human and macaque. And then B2 continues from the upper representation for the ventral part of the V2, and then lower part of the vision goes to dorsal part of the V2, and so on. And then V4 is located only for the ventral side, and then V3A corresponds to the dorsal side. These functional anatomical name can change over the time, so you don't need to worry too much about it beyond V2, V3, V4. Okay, and then so all these, ventral side versus dorsal side has a sort of mirror symmetric kind of representation, but only within right hemisphere for this presentation. And this island of MT is the part that I'm going to talk about towards the end of this lecture. The V2 neurons are known to respond strongly to the illusory contours or illusory lines. So if the monkey is fixating at this, kind of central cross, and then you move the bars, then if that matches with the receptive field of this neuron, then it neurons fires like drrr, drrr, very, very strong, response when it matches with the receptive field. But when again neuron is fixating here, if there is a line like this, then you can kind of infer that there's a line going on. So when you move like this, there's a little bit of the response, and then okay. So different rows are different repetitions typically. But if you insert a little bit of that space between this location here, there was no space, then your inference about this, line occluded by this black part becomes much, much weaker, both cognitively and visually. And that mimics this V2's silence of the response here. On the other hand, if you make some kind of the lines like this, composed of the many bunch of the lines, which is slightly mislocated, then you strongly feel like there is a line here. And that produces a very strong response in V2. Taking advantage of this type of the finding, so there were some researchers that utilized this knowledge for the, again, consciousness experiment as follows. So here, what the researcher did is to use the illusory line to generate an adaptation and a crowding experiment, like the one that I explained a couple of minutes ago. So here they asked the people to look at these red dots, and then across this goes over the time. So over the time they generated different bunch of the stimulus here, but important thing is that the second from the top here always generate illusory horizontal line. And then they asked people to adapt to this display for, let's say, 1 minute or so, and then they showed some kind of flash to indicate that this adaptation period is finished, and then tested with the visibility of this horizontal or vertical adapted or non-adapted stimulus. And then when they did the important check of the visibility of the stimulus itself during the crowded situation, all the subjects showed chance performance. Okay, that's very important to check. And then next, when they did the adaptation task, they found, as expected, if it's tested with a different stimulus, like here, then the performance was very accurate, in terms of the detection. On the other hand, if it's the same as adaptation direction, then orientation, then they were near chance, but still above chance. And the important twist for this particular experiment was that they added an attention manipulation, actually. because they knew that this kind of adaptation should happen without visibility, they added this important experiment. So asking subjects to detect the color, detect the number that is, for example, even and black or something like that. And then this number, if it changes very, very quickly, you need to really pay attention to this number stream. And then if you do that, then your attention to these adapted orientation should be weaker. That's their hypothesis. And then when they did that, then this differentiated orientation dependent adaptation effect of the invisible stimulus became pretty much gone. This is a bit complicated logic, but here's what they is a summary. Okay, so first of all, the neurons in V2 seems to respond to illusory lines, and that has been replicated a lot and across monkeys and humans using fMRI. And then also illusory lines can generate adaptation effect, even though they are not visible based on the crowding. However, this non-conscious adaptation effect requires attentional amplification. And here, you are not really trying to see it by attention. I mean, if you try to see it, you can't see it. That's something that you can also try with the demonstration, a couple of the last video by yourself. This case, attention is just availability to give some kind of, further processing. But just withdrawing that attentional resource makes this non-conscious adaptation impossible. So non-conscious processing does require attentional amplification in this case. Then this poses a question about sufficiency of attention for conscious perception. Already, in week 2, some of you have raised a question during the tutorial that, is attention necessary or sufficient for consciousness? And here's one particular example where unconscious processing requires attention. And the opposite way of saying is that attending something does not guarantee that you see things. And here's the next, in 2 weeks, we'll go into the sufficiency and necessity of attention for conscious vision. Okay, and in the next video, we'll go into the strong candidate for the NCC for visual motion in MT.